Welcome to Codex History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
That was a real impressive dance you just did there.
Thank you. Very much appreciate it.
Yeah, well, we're back after a week off because of my computer issues. We'll talk about that later. Let's get into the Donkey Kong origin.
Yeah.
My announcer voice?
So this week I wanted to kind of cover the origins of Donkey Kong as a series and maybe like the character himself, how it started, why it started. There were some early legal pitfalls. We won't get into that in this episode just yet. But we might do a few episodes here, but I want to talk about like the genesis of the original Donkey Kong game, the 1981 arcade hit classic Donkey Kong, which is one of the earliest franchises for Nintendo, and actually probably the earliest, since I don't think Radar Scope is considered a franchise. I don't think there's much there beyond one game that did not do very well.
What happened to Radar Scopes 2, 3, 4, and 5? That's the real question.
That's a great question. They don't exist.
Mm-hmm.
But Nintendo, which had been around for, 75 years at this point, because they were late 1800s when they were first
making cards.
Yeah, making cards. So over 75 years, maybe close to 100 years. I don't know. So Nintendo's an old company, which we've talked about before on this show. That company is way older than you think it is. But they were pretty happy making toys for kids in this period of time, like kind of the early to mid 70s. But in the 70s, there was a big problem, and it's called the 1973 oil crisis. Did you think that an episode about Donkey Kong would involve the 1973 oil crisis, Mike?
I would not. I would not have thought that.
Well, it was on my bingo card, so guess what? That's one for me.
I lost. You got a bingo. You get to put the little dot down, and I don't win anything.
Yeah. So basically, the TLDR, because this is not a history of the oil crisis, but the TLDR is OPEC, which was called OAPEC at the time, Organization of Petroleum countries. Petroleum, I didn't write it out what the thing stands for. OPEC.
If you want to research OPEC's acronym on your own, you can go do that.
That's
a
pretty easy Google. But they decided that they weren't going to sell oil to any countries that supported Israel during the 1973 Yom Kippur War. So the more things change, the more they stay the same, it seems. Both the United States and Japan were on this list of countries to embargo. And obviously, those were the most important countries to Nintendo at the time. So what does this have to do with oil, Mike? You might ask. Well, a lot of toys are made with plastic. And do you know what one of the most important ingredients is in the making of plastic?
Is it oil?
It's oil. Which feels strange to me, but I guess I don't know how plastic is made. So
no, it's like why it's not. It's like a petroleum product. Yeah, that's what they talk about.
Just don't think of it that way.
You don't, but it is true. It's made with fossil fuels.
Yeah, and of course I'm talking like dinosaur juice oil, not like olive oil from the grocery store. This is
delicious dino juice.
Yeah, delicious dino juice that I pour all over my spaghetti.
That's right.
It's very expensive, especially disgusting. In 1973. So the price of oil in the United States and Japan, and I guess generally speaking around the world, it shoots way up in 1973 because a lot of the oil that Japan and the United States and North America were getting was coming from these countries. Now they didn't have it anymore. Price of oil goes way, way up. The embargo does eventually end in March of 1974. But because
70 soar like it was a dinosaur. I see
70
what you
soar.
did.
That's what it was. Yeah, 1970 soar. But because everything is connected always, this oil crisis sets the stage for what would become the oil crisis of 1979, which is much closer to where our Donkey Kong story begins. And the United States just really couldn't catch a break in the 70s around this stuff. Jimmy Carter had to deal with a lot there as president. But anyway, because of oil's importance in making plastic and therefore in the making of all kinds of plastic toys that Nintendo sells, they realized they needed to figure out another revenue stream that wasn't so dependent on foreign oil. It's always good to diversify what you make so that there's no single point of failure. This is a good business decision for them. Ultimately, probably the best business decision they could have ever made because they're a way bigger company now than I think they would have gotten just by being a toy manufacturer and card maker. So right around this time, in 1978, is when Space Invaders dropped in the arcades. And that game really took the world by storm, and it proved that there was a market for video games beyond Pong, which could have just been seen as kind of a neat novelty or curiosity at the time. People who played Pong in bars and stuff weren't thinking about how this was like the start of a new like medium of artistic expression. They were just like, it's a fun little game. You play at the bar, like video poker, like there's all kinds of silly little games you can play, right? It's hard to imagine this time when games could have been considered like a fad or unimportant to cultural conversations. But in the early days, it, again, really wasn't clear that this was going to be a medium that was just as important as movies, music, or literature. Anyway, this is all a lot to say that the 1973 oil crisis led to the video game industry as we know it today. Would it have happened anyway? Yeah, maybe. But it almost certainly would have looked a lot different, and it almost certainly would not have been led by Nintendo, at least not in the 1980s. So all of this set on Nintendo on down the path to make a game called Radar Scope, which is officially the first video game ever made by Nintendo, I think. Actually, there were a couple before that because they did the TV games at home and they did like Space Fever and stuff like that. But it was an arcade cabinet, and it was pretty similar to Space Invaders and some of the other games that they had made. One thing
Real
that's
quick,
yeah.
I'll do an editor's note here. Well, it's not an editor's note because I'm not editing. A quick little reference here is we covered that on our episodes with that book that was really expensive that I bought, the Nintendo early years history.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So we talk about like when they actually started making games. If you want to know more about those early games, we covered that in those episodes.
Yeah,
So,
you go back and find those because I might be sort of inaccurate in my facts here.
no, I don't think you're inaccurate in your facts, but I think we'd go through the order chronologically of like the first actual video games they made, though, in that episode.
Yeah. But so one thing that stays constant in the ever-changing world of video games is that most video games are just rip-offs of other video games.
Oh, yeah, dude. These early ones, it was so bad.
Yeah, especially way in the early days because it was like people didn't know sort of what the possibilities were. It was just like, oh, we can also make a Pong game, so we will. And they're like, if we make our paddles a little bit bigger, then that's a different game, right? So that's just like how this stuff was back in those days. Some of these ripoffs were shameless. Others simply stand on the shoulders of giants and shouldn't be chastised for that. Obviously, we don't call Call of Duty like a Doom ripoff just because it's also a first-person shooter. It takes many cues from that game, but I wouldn't call it a ripoff in the strictest sense, in that it's like a infringement on. It's like a building upon, right? It's like stands on the shoulders of giants.
I think the technological limitations at the time is also what caused this to be like clones, because now it's a lot easier to make a new thing versus back then.
Yeah.
When it was just like, so you only had so many kilobytes to work with back then. So
right. And because there weren't that many games out there, like the people's imagination just weren't that big either as far as what games like this could be, you know? So yeah, the Radar, so they made Radar Scope, which was kind of just a Space Invaders ripoff. Critics at the time thought it was a meaningful improvement over the core gameplay of Space Invaders, so it was like better than Space Invaders, but still mostly the same. But it wasn't their first foray into novelty or electronic game cabinets, because they had games like Wild Gunman or the Laser Clay shooting system, which are like early.
Dude.
They're like early games. They're not really video games because they're not, but they're like electromechanical. They have a lot of like actual real moving parts, which is like kind of cool. But Radar Scope was a full-on video game. They had already made games like Sheriff and Space Fever as like their first games, but this was like kind of a big one. I want to shout out to Space Fever here because Game Boy Camera had Space Fever 2, if you remember.
Did.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a Game Boy Camera and I played quite a bit of Space Fever 2. That's right.
Yeah, I didn't think about it at the time as being like a sequel to a game that had already existed. I don't know what I thought it was. I thought it was like maybe a fake sequel, or like this is a game that like the Space Fever 1 is not even a real game. But or maybe I just didn't give it that much thought. But it was interesting when I saw, oh, Space Fever. I played that on Game Boy Camera, and then I realized that was Space Fever 2.
Yeah, dude, that was that takes me back.
Yeah. But importantly,
we should talk about the Game Boy Camera some episode.
We should. There is a Neil Young album where the album cover is actually a photo taken with a Game Boy Camera. I can't remember what the album is. It's like a late 90s Neil Young album. Yeah.
That's a great fact you just pulled out there.
Yeah. And I've seen the cover of that album, and it looks like it was taken with a Game Boy Camera. Yeah. So importantly, these video games that they were making did not rely on expensive plastics as much as the rest of Nintendo's portfolio of products did at the time, and thus they were much less sensitive to price changes in oil. So everything is connected, man. We can follow these threads for a long time. You can go down a lot of rabbit holes here. But we probably will go down some of those rabbit holes. But this episode is not going to cover the entire Donkey Kong franchise. or all of those rabbit holes. But maybe we'll get there one day. So,
Oh yeah, real quick. We're seeing it being affected and everything's connected right now with like console price hikes in relation to the tariffs. So like it's still happening all the time right before your eyes, you know.
Yeah.
Regardless of how you feel politically, it's just like it's affecting it, and that's why Xbox Series X's just went up again.
Yeah,
And then
Costco is just like, we don't do that anymore. We don't sell Xboxes.
Yeah, and then PlayStation, the rumor is they're going to go up too again.
Yeah, the Switch one already went up.
Which is wild that the Switch one went up.
Yeah, that's nearly 10 years old, and it went up in price. That's wild.
That's crazy to me.
It was already crazy that it like really didn't get a real price drop in its entire lifetime, but then it went up in price at the end of it. That's wild. But the reason we're talking about Radar Scope here and not Sheriff or Space Fever is because unlike those games, Radar Scope was a complete commercial failure. Critics liked it. They said it was cool. It was a neat like riff on the Space Invaders type of gameplay. But it did not sell well outside of Japan. It did okay in Japan, but they just weren't making a dent in the US. The problem with having an unsuccessful arcade game is more than just the sunk cost of having built the game and then like releasing it to commercial failure. They had a whole bunch of Radar Scope cabinets just lying around, and they didn't have anybody who wanted to buy them because the game just wasn't doing very well. Maybe it was too similar to Space Invaders. People felt like they'd already played it. Even if the game's good, if you can't get people to drop their quarters in the machine because you can't convince them, then it's a commercial failure, right? So they had a whole bunch of these arcade cabinets lying around. I bet if you could find an old Radar Scope cabinet, it'd be worth like a ton of money.
Oh yeah.
But the nice thing about arcade cabinets is that you can repurpose them pretty easily by swapping out the art and the software, especially if you reuse the electronics, like the hardware in there. So Arakawa, who was the head of Nintendo at the time, he tasked an artist, the only guy available to do something. He wanted him to create a new game for the Radar Scope cabinets that they could just swap the art out and just like swap in new software and like basically not have all of these Radar Scope cabinets go to waste. So he picked the only person that was available at the time, an artist. That person's name was friend of the podcast, Shigeru Miyamoto. He was already at Nintendo. He'd done some art for some other stuff, but this was like kind of the first time he'd been tasked with like, hey, you got to go make a game, and it needs to run on Radar Scope hardware so that we can swap all of these Radar Scope cabinets into whatever your new game is and try to sell that new game. That way we don't lose all of our investment in making these cabinets. I think they had like 2,000 of them lying around. We'll get there. So Miyamoto went into a little cave or into his office or something. I don't know. Don't know where he worked.
His mind palace.
His mind palace to start thinking about what kind of games he could make. Mike just did a very funny like pointed to his brain thing.
I feel like that's what you do when you go into the mind palace.
Yeah, you point to your brain
and you close your eyes and you think really hard. That's probably. Do you think Shigeru Miyamoto like realizes, like, does he wake up every day realizing like how many like children and now adults' lives he's affected?
I don't know, man, because his effect on popular culture and just like the way people live their lives today is massive. I mean, without him,
it's bigger than most like people.
Yeah,
I would think like that's what's crazy to me is like no one talks about, like, we talk about him because we're huge nerds about this, but like a person that's just living in society today who's experienced Mario and video games, like this is the guy, right?
Yeah.
That's like the crazy. That's a crazy. Like, I wonder if he was ever on Time's influential people list. He's got to be.
I don't know. But in the early 80s, this guy was just like churning out resonant IP left and right, like just sort of like absent-mindedly just making games, and then their spin-offs become the biggest game franchises in the world. That kind of stuff.
And it all came from his mind palace.
That's right.
I don't really know what that means. I just say it. It's fun to say a mind palace.
Mind palace. It's like a place you go. Thing? Yeah, you go in your mind, and it's like a physical space that you occupy in your mind, and maybe you put things some places. I don't know. I imagine it is something
Sherlock
that resonates.
Holmes did it.
Yeah.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, that sounds like something Sherlock Holmes would do.
Mm-hmm.
Have a mind palace.
I'm going to build a mind palace after this episode. All right, let's go ahead and keep going. Sorry.
So Miyamoto iterated on a lot of different scenarios. He's not an engineer, so his work on games largely comes in the form of scenario planning and gameplay ideation, and art, I suppose, or at least in those early days, he was probably doing a lot of art. I would imagine being an artist is helpful in this kind of job. I think his lack of engineering talent was a bit of an asset because it allowed him to kind of think outside the box of what's like technically possible. He had a lot of ideas that would initially be shot down by engineering because they were pretty hard and there were limitations on hardware at the time. But he was able to push to get some cool things done. And I'm just speaking generally, not about Donkey Kong in particular, although I'm sure this is true about that. But he was able to push to get some cool things done that might not have happened if RoccoW had put somebody more technical in that role. So at first, what Miyamoto wanted to do was a Popeye game, a game based on Popeye, which I totally understand the thinking. They were failing in the U.S. marketplace. Radar Scope was not a hit, and they probably thought it might be helpful to license some IP that's resonant in that market. And Popeye fits the bill, right? Bluto could kidnap Olive Oyl, and Popeye could come to her rescue. Seems like a reasonable scenario, especially in the 1980s. Mike, did you know that Popeye goes all the way back to 1929? Did you know he's that old? Like, I knew he's old.
Oh, Tyler. I, as a kid, for some reason, this is very random, had like you know how they do like the encyclopedia of IPs?
Mm-hmm.
I had the Popeye one. So yes, I did know it went back to 1920. And I remember reading it as a kid and be like, this is fascinating. Because I loved Popeye. I loved the cartoon, though, like where he'd drink the spinach and then his like bicep muscle would like move back and forth. Like I liked that as a kid. So my mom bought me this encyclopedia on the history of it. So yes, I did know that.
Wow. Okay.
I know. Deep cut.
Deep cut. Dang. Mike's secret Popeye expert here.
Secret Popeye.
I didn't know that. I guess I didn't know when I thought it started. I guess I would have guessed like the 50s or something, like whenever the cartoon was kind of a thing, but I didn't know it went all the way back to basically the late 1920s as far as comics go and stuff like that. And Olive Oyl herself goes back even further because she was already a character in the comic strip called Thimble Theater, which introduced Popeye later on. And then later he became so popular in that comic that it just became Popeye. Kind of like when like Archie comics just became Archie. Like they were something else before that. Was it Riverdale or maybe? Yeah,
Riverdale.
And there was just like Archie is the guy, so now it's Archie the comic.
By the way, there is a Popeye movie that never came out that is 3D animated, but it was mostly finished and it got leaked. And I remember watching it. This was like 2 or 3 years ago. And it's really good.
What? It was like, is it one of those Warner Brothers ones that got canceled for tax reasons?
Yeah, but it was like mostly done. And so it got leaked, the whole movie. And so there's definitely some parts in it that are still like storyboarded that it'll like skip through, but then it'll go back to the animation and it looks good and it's voice acted. And you're like, this is a really good movie. But I remember watching that on a comedy road trip one time. A buddy had it on his laptop. I'm like, let's watch Popeye. I'm like, let's watch Popeye.
Okay. I wish somebody would leak the Batgirl movie. That?
I know, right? Like, there's so many of these movies now that are just not coming out because of weird budgeting things that they made. They're like, done. Like, just release them.
There's like a weird tax thing with the acquisition of Warner Brothers. It was like, it's actually, we make more money if we just cancel this and take the tax break.
So weird.
Which is kind of crazy that feels like a failing of the system if it can incentivize just like spiking something instead of releasing it to people.
For sure. But that was my Popeye tangent.
All right. Well, I guess that's all for this episode of Codex, a history of Popeye the Sailor Man. So tune in next time for,
Spinach decks.
Yeah. Unfortunately, because Nintendo respects IP law so much and uses it as a weapon whenever they can, they were unable to use the Popeye characters after the licensing deal with the owners of Popeye fell through, which is a bummer for them at the time, but good for us because it meant that Miyamoto had to come up with something entirely new for the game that would save their butts after the failure of Radar Scope. Now, I've seen it said that Miyamoto and crew also had trouble with the Popeye characters from an art perspective, given the limitations of arcade machines at the time. So it could be like maybe a combination of both. Like maybe they couldn't make the Popeye characters look good, and so the owners of Popeye were like, we're not going to let you do this because you can't accurately represent Popeye in a video game form, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of unclear as to like what the actual reason that they couldn't end up using Popeye. It doesn't matter because eventually they would go on to make a Popeye game a few years after this, but that is not this game. So basically they took the same scenario but reworked it to make Olive Oyl into Lady, who would be later renamed Pauline before launch, but not in the game itself. They reworked Popeye into Jumpman, and Bluto into the stubborn ape called Donkey Kong. Donkey because he's stubborn, and Kong because that's sort of like a generic slang term for gorillas in Japan. So Donkey Kong kind of would roughly translate to like stubborn ape in Japanese, which, okay, totally makes sense. I get maybe that's because of the King Kong movie was especially resonant in Japan in the 30s. I don't know. But this scenario works as kind of an adaptation of King Kong as well, the movie, with the gorilla carrying the damsel in distress to the top of a building. Somebody has to come save her. So have you played much of the original Donkey Kong, Mike?
I think I've played more of Donkey Kong Jr. because you know how they have like different versions of it. And I played more of Junior than the original, but I have played the original and I'm not good at it.
Yeah, it's a hard game.
It's hard.
I mean, all these arcade games were like sort of designed to be hard because they wanted you to keep feeding quarters to it, so they couldn't just like give it to you. But they had to be easy enough that you felt like you had a shot too. You know, there's sometimes you boot up a game, you're like, this is too hard. I'm not putting any more money into this. But you need like the balance there of just like, ooh, I was so close. I know exactly what I need to do next time. Okay, put another quarter in. You know,
it was a real fine line. Yeah.
Yeah. I have played a lot of the original Donkey Kong. Not in like arcade form, but because the first 4 levels of that game of the 1994 Donkey Kong game for Game Boy are just the 4 levels that make up the Donkey Kong arcade game. They sort of serve as like a tutorial.
Oh.
Yeah. They serve as kind of a tutorial for that Donkey Kong game on the Game Boy, which is a game I played a lot of as a kid. After you finish those 4 levels in Donkey Kong 94, it kind of becomes more of a puzzle game. If you've ever played the Mario versus Donkey Kong games, that's like that is the original Mario versus Donkey Kong game, and like the others sort of built off of that. And it goes like, that's like definitely just the tutorial. There's like a ton of levels after that, and I never got very far. But just getting past those first 4 levels was like a huge achievement for me as a kid. I remember beating them and then realizing that the game was like actually huge and way more than just those games, and that was awesome. But that's Donkey Kong 94, not Donkey Kong the arcade game, which does just have those 4 levels. So we'll talk about that game at some point, I'm sure, because it spawned a whole sub-franchise that is pretty cool as well. So Donkey Kong, I think, is one of the first games that could be considered a platform game. Because it's an 80s game, the screen doesn't scroll. It's just you get there's like one thing on the screen. You start as Jumpman at the bottom of the level. You got to make it to the top of the level, avoiding barrels, fireballs, other obstacles. And then you climb the little ladder, and then Donkey Kong grabs Pauline and like continues climbing. And so you keep chasing him down. There's 4 levels. So there's a construction site. Jumpman himself is a construction worker. There's a factory, which what they're making is like kind of unclear. It varies from version to version. I've heard it called a cement factory or a pie factory. It's really just not clear. There's a screen called elevators because there's a couple of different like elevators that are going up and down, and Mario has to like very carefully time his jumps while dodging everything. Or not Mario, Jumpman. He was Jumpman at this time. Jumpman has to time his jumps just right, because it gets pretty hard. That level, I think, is the hardest one. Is the 3rd level, the elevators. And then there's the final screen called rivets, where Mario has to run across all of the rivets in the level. So there's like 4 platforms, and Donkey Kong's at the top. And there's like there's a few rivets. You got to run across all of them. Basically, you have to kind of zigzag across all of the games. Anyway, we end up taking out all the support for Donkey Kong in the center so that it collapses, and that's how you win. And you save Pauline. And because this is an 80s arcade game, the game doesn't end there. You just start over at the construction site and do it again. Only this time it's faster and there's more obstacles and it's just harder. It just generally just harder. There is an ending, I'd say with air quotes, if you could call it that, in that after you've cleared the game 22 times, you hit what's called the kill screen. Which is I think 130 levels. So if you're considering a pack of 4 levels as a like clearing the game, you clear the game 22 times, so that's 130 levels. And this kill screen is kind of a term for old games like this, where basically you've gotten too far into the game and some like the numbers got too big on what level you're on, or whatever numbers are incrementing at this point, and it just sort of like collapses on itself. The game just sort of like bugs out and dies. It's not like the developers went, you beat it 22 times, good for you, game's over now. It's really just like this, you beat it so many times that number is too big for us to handle, and now the game will behave very unpredictably.
Yeah, it has to do with the actual like memory size of the game, right? Or if it's like 8-bit or 16-bit, like a 16-bit game could go longer in theory.
Yeah. Usually in these games that are like 8-bit, usually you run into some sort of limit when some number in there hits 256.
Yeah.
And then it usually wraps back around to 0, and that kind of causes all kinds of strange effects. It could be, if it's a signed integer 256, that means it can go negative. Then it's like you have 128, negative 128 goes all the way to 128. And so when you pass 128, which may be what's happening in Donkey Kong here, because you pass 122 levels, which is pretty close to that magic number of 128. And then it wraps back around to negative 128. And that's when it's like, game's like, I don't know what to do with a negative number here. And then it just
What's
like
happening?
sort of falls apart.
Yeah.
It just sort of glitches out, you die, game's over, and great job, you did it. Pac-Man is another game that sort of ends this way, where you just get too far into the game, and there are lots of other arcade games that end like this, and it just sort of becomes a glitchy mess once you get too good at them. And I guess they never assumed people would get that good, or maybe they thought, you know what, if you get that good and the game glitches out, okay, we're fine with that. You put enough money into this thing to get that far. We're not that worried about it.
I think in gaming news, by the way, I think someone got past what they thought was Tetris's kill screen recently.
Oh, interesting.
Like, they got farther past it than they thought they could. So I don't know if that's because of a kill screen or if that's because of like a control thing. Because Tetris, have you heard of like competitive Tetris?
Oh yeah, they play with like the controllers like upside
Where
down,
they,
and
they like
do like
this
weird,
crazy
all kinds of weird stuff.
Like,
yeah,
he found something new with that. I think it was like a teenager too, and they got past like a certain screen that no one had ever gotten past before, which is pretty crazy.
yeah, that's
Cool
wild.
that in 2024, 2025, I think it was 2024 when that happened. Like, people are still finding new ways to get past these old games, you know?
Yeah, it's got to be interesting as like a programmer of those games, where you go, dang, somebody has spent more time playing this game than I spent making it, so that they can get past the parts of the game that are like sort of just, I mean, I hesitate to say it's a programming flaw in the game, but kind of, right? It's like sort of just like you spent more time trying to get past this like physical limitation of the machine than I spent making the whole game.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, dang.
It's so wild. That's why I like speedrunning so much, because it's like people are trying to break the game
Yeah.
to find the way through.
Yeah.
Cool.
You've watched King of Kong, right? The documentary.
Oh, I love that
It's
movie.
so good.
I probably watch it every 5 years.
Yeah.
Because I just love it.
I might be due for a rewatch. Maybe I'll watch that today, actually.
Maybe we watch it together on the show.
Ooh, that's a good commentary movie. Good commentary movie for us. Game movie for us. If you haven't watched it, I highly recommend, because they talk about kill screens a lot in that game. But if you just got to watch King of Kong. It's just it's such a good documentary that makes the stakes of like video game high score competition seem way bigger than they are. It feels like life or death. It's very dramatic, and
they get so into like, well, his tape is not, because you have to like film the screen on a VHS tape at the time and submit the VHS tape to something Galaxy. What's it called?
Twin Galaxies.
Twin Galaxies. And then they like review it, and then there's all these politics involved, because there's like, it's where the whole Billy Mitchell guy comes from, which has been dramatic lately. It's just hilarious.
Yeah, he's been in the news relatively recently too. Because that
Which
documentary is
we'll
like
not
20 years
comment
old now.
on, because I'm afraid of a lawsuit. I don't know about you. That's what the news has been. Is he's been suing people.
Oh, Billy Mitchell just suing people left and
Yeah,
right.
he's suing people because they're calling him a cheater, allegedly.
Oh.
I think if you say allegedly, that protects us from the law, right?
Yeah, I'm not saying he's a cheater,
Allegedly.
but other people are saying it.
Yeah, that's what's going on in the news. And so there was an Australian YouTuber that got taken to court, and I think the YouTuber lost, because it's like a court in Australia, and their like free speech laws are different than ours. So that's a very bland synopsis of what happened. I think I could be really brushing over some big stuff there. But but this is King of Kong is what introduced Billy Mitchell and Twin Galaxies and all these delightful weirdos to the world, is what I'll call them.
Delightful weirdos.
The guy that plays Missile Command is just like exactly who you expect to be super into Missile Command, and it's amazing. It's just such a perfect movie. Yeah, watch King of Kong, everybody. Oh,
Great
so
movie.
good.
Great movie. I think they did a sequel to it as well. Maybe I haven't watched that.
They did one that was about Twin Galaxies.
Okay.
Like it's more Twin Galaxy focused, and it's about that picture they all took together, where they were all kids and they had like the best video game players in the world or whatever, and it was of course a very Americanized thing, right? Like,
Yeah.
because it didn't include anyone not in the U.S.
Yeah, we got submissions from Washington all the way to Florida, everyone around the world.
Yeah, it was very much how the Major League Baseball is just the like. Well, now they got but they call it the World Series, right? And it's like this 2 Canadian teams. Okay,
Yeah. The NFL, the Super Bowl is like, okay.
Yeah, like
Great.
all right, whatever. Yeah.
So yeah, that's King of Kong. Highly recommend. So now we get into basically this game is made, it comes out, and as expected, because we're doing a story on it, or because we're doing an episode on it, this game sells like hotcakes and gangbusters.
Oh, yes, it does.
Yeah. So the gambit to rework the unsuccessful radar scope machines and put a new game out into the US with the same hardware was successful. So Arakawa himself, alongside his wife and a few others, converted over 2,000 arcade cabinets from radar scope to Donkey Kong. They did it themselves. Like they went into the warehouse and they were swapping out the art and like the ROM chips and whatever things that they needed to do. Yeah.
It feels so like, indie for Nintendo, for small indie company Nintendo.
And they were at the time, they were kind of small indie company, right? Especially when it came to video games. I mean, this is 1981. This is before the NES. This is before like they'd had some success in some electromagnetic game or electromechanical games, some success with like a few like really, really early video games. But so I would say I would classify them probably as small indie company at this point. They probably only had a few dozen employees, right?
Yeah, especially like going to the warehouse and just fixing it themselves. It's like they don't have the staff to do that. I love that. I love little stories like this where you're like, it's just people who are trying to make a business happen.
Yep. Just like making video games, So they got it together and they replaced all of those cabinets with the Donkey Kong art and hardware, and they started selling them around the U.S. They started putting them out in Seattle at first. There was a couple of arcades that they just put like a couple in, and it did very well there. And so they were like, okay, we got a hit here. We got something.
That's where I'm living.
Yeah.
Right now.
Yeah. Well, Nintendo, it lives in Redmond.
It is in Redmond. I've driven by it many times, and I've heard they are not cool with you going there if you don't work there or have an appointment, so I've never gone. I've always wanted to go inside. I know a guy that works in Nintendo, and I need to ask him. I don't know him that well, but I'm going to be like, you know what, man? I'm taking the plunge. Can I come and have a day of work with you?
Do you have an uncle who works at Nintendo?
I have an uncle that works in Nintendo, yeah.
Yeah. An uncle that works at Donkey Kong?
He works for Donkey Kong.
For the gorilla.
I mean, he wears a tie, so it's like he's at work.
That's true. Donkey Kong is dressed like a boss.
True.
Yeah. So interestingly, I think, and maybe part of the reason why it did so well is that Donkey Kong is it might be the first game to have a story that plays out in the game itself. Like lots of other games at the time would have like stories that are like written on the like the outside of the machine or in the manual, like that kind of stuff. But they weren't much more than just like text that just like let you know kind of the scenario and like why are we doing what we're doing here. But Donkey Kong has a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that's all told in game, right? You start at the bottom, you climb to the top of the tower, you save the damsel in distress, and the game is over. Well, it starts over again, but harder. But like you complete a story, right? And that was unique at the time for these games. Most of them didn't do stuff like that. So this might be the first game that did that. And maybe that's part of why it resonated so well, was because it felt like a complete experience. Once you had done it, you like felt satisfied by the end, which I think is pretty cool. And if there's one thing I've learned in my life, it's that humans can always be grabbed by a story that resonates, no matter how simple it might be. Donkey Kong was fun. It felt like you were in control of the story that was playing out on screen. And I think that's why it resonated so well.
For sure. And I wonder how many people played Donkey Kong and beat those 4 levels, and then we're like, I'm done, and then it started over again, and they're like, wait, what?
Yeah, they're like, oh, awesome. It's like Pac-Man just keeps going, right? It's just the same thing. It just keeps going. It's faster and faster, and it gets harder, but it's just the same thing every time. Space Invaders, same thing. It speeds up, and then when you're done shooting all the bad guys, more bad guys come back, and we just do it again, right? Maybe it gets a little harder this time, and you just keep going until you lose. And Donkey Kong did that as well, but it actually had like a reset point where you're like, oh, I actually had to start over. We're like back at the beginning of the story here.
Yeah, it's funny because I was like, we've talked about like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man. I'm always like, have we talked about these? And the answer is yes, because they're usually in the book that we covered, The Ultimate History of Video Games. Like,
Mhm.
it's usually in there. But maybe it's worth going back and doing a deep dive on some of these older ones like you did today. Because, like, we talked about Pac-Man in passing, but not really fully.
Yeah. And I think
So,
it's like there's usually interesting stories about the people around those. Like that's what I find interesting about doing things like this is like talking about the circumstances that led up to this game. Why did they make this game? Why was it successful? What are some cool stories that happened during development? Like the game itself is fine, but I think anybody who's listening to this probably at least familiar enough with Donkey Kong that they like know what the game is, the original game. And if not, you can find it in 800,000 different places online to play at this point. Probably you can just play an old version of it. 'Cause it's pretty simple. But I just love the other stories that are around it, like they replaced all the cabinets themselves, in the warehouse, that kind of stuff. Um,
yeah, for sure. No, yeah, this is a really good story, Tyler. You brought a great story today.
Thanks. That's what I try to do here. And Donkey Kong itself had a great story for video games at the time, and it did so well that they started getting offers from home video game console companies to license the game for people to play in their homes on their TVs. And remember, the NES wasn't out at this point. Nintendo didn't really have a home console business. They had the color TV games that were just kind of like variations of Pong. They didn't have cartridges. You weren't like buying new games for them. But companies like Atari and Coleco were coming to them and saying, "Hey, we want to make this game for people to buy and play at home." Yeah, lost my place in the notes here. Yeah, so Atari and Coleco had cartridge-based systems at this time, and they wanted to produce adaptations of Donkey Kong for the 2600 and the ColecoVision, respectively. Ultimately, Nintendo went with Coleco, who produced versions of the game for their own ColecoVision, as well as the Atari 2600. I find that interesting that Coleco used to also make games for the Atari 2600, even though they had their own.
Oh, like as a third party?
Yeah, they had their own console, though. I mean, I guess that's Microsoft does that now. Like they have the Xbox, but like you can buy. I was gonna say Halo, but you can't buy Halo on PlayStation 5 yet. But the rumor mill is churning. It seems like that might be coming at some point. But
yeah, I don't want to start a whole like console wars scenario on our podcast, but I do think it's interesting that in 2025 there are still people saying, "Well, PlayStation's destroying Microsoft." I think those two companies are playing two completely different games at this point. There's not like someone I know a friend of mine mentioned recently that like Xbox is dying. I'm like, Xbox is not dying. They're shifting away from hardware. And I think, or not even shifting away from it, diversifying on what hardware they're on is what they're doing. Because they're like, we're going to sell more copies of Indiana Jones and the Great Circle if we put it on PlayStation. And it's like, yeah, they are. So might as well make that money. Like exclusives don't make as much money, I think, as third-party games if it's success. Like if a third-party game's successful, that's just a bigger market, right?
Yeah.
It's like way more consoles, PC, all that jazz. And I hope it makes more PlayStation stuff come to other places too. Like already doing PC, which is what I care about. But like it would be cool to see like PlayStation titles like on Nintendo or something. Like that would be really cool.
Well,
like, I don't know if they'd ever do that, but
I think they might be kind of open to that because there's the Horizon Zero Dawn Lego game that's on Switch.
Oh, and that's a Sony IP.
That is
right
Sony IP as far as I know. And it's not Sony IP, but like Final Fantasy VII Remake and Rebirth are both coming to Switch as well. Those are already on PC and they're coming to Xbox as well. So like, and that's third party. But they were sort of PlayStation and PC exclusives for a long time, and now they're swapping it.
Yeah,
or they're coming out on everything.
I just think it's interesting too because it's just like the whole scope of this industry is changing right now in like a big way, and it's exciting. It's exciting to me because you get to see more indies popping up too, like especially with the $70 game. Like this is indies time. Silk Song, $20. It's amazing. I'm going to talk about it in a bit.
$20 for Silk Song is
it's
insane.
bananas.
I haven't played it yet, but dang, I need to. And it's also on Game Pass too. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it.
But so back to Donkey Kong. One of the things that Coleco did with Donkey Kong, the home console version, is they made it a pack-in game for the ColecoVision, which was a good choice because we know the power of a good pack-in game, right?
It's powerful.
Yep, very, very powerful. So Interestingly, the contract with Coleco was drafted up by Nintendo's lawyer at the time, Howard Lincoln, and included a clause that made Coleco liable for whatever was on the cartridge, which is strange. I think that's a strange thing to include in a contract. Now, you might think Donkey Kong sounds kind of familiar. And the giant ape kidnaps woman and man comes to save her by climbing buildings as a scenario might also sound familiar to you because they are. They are very similar to the characters and settings in the Universal property called King Kong, a movie that released in the 1930s about a giant gorilla who kidnaps damsels.
No, I think the way you worded it in here, damsel kidnapping gorilla, is grammatically correct as well.
A giant damsel kidnapping gorilla.
Yeah, that sounds fine.
Or it's a giant damsel who kidnapped a gorilla, which I would like to play that version of the game too.
A comma would do a lot of work here if you moved it in there. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. So surely there are some copyright shenanigans going on here because Kong is kind of on the nose as well as the gorilla, all of that stuff. But that is something that we'll have to get into next time, Mike, because Universal versus Nintendo is a whole thing unto itself, I think. It is a very interesting story. We've talked about it a little bit on here before because it is part of the Ultimate History of Video Games book that we covered literally dozens of years ago. I don't know. How long have we been doing this for?
Oh, it's felt like forever, but it's flown by. We've been doing it since 2018 at least.
Yeah, so
earlier, 2017.
Yeah, so 7-8 years ago we covered some of this, but I would like to do a little bit of a deeper dive as part of this sort of series because again, this is the kind of stuff that is more interesting to me than the games themselves. It's like the stories of the things that happen around the games. So if you have thoughts on that approach to this content, please send us an email. But I have a question for you, Mike, and that is, what you been playing?
It's entirely Silk Song. I mean, so, okay, let me get into the drama here of the PC. So what happened, folks, is I built a new PC, and it's not anything fancy. I'll put the specs in the Discord if you want. That's fine. But pretty much TLDR is last Sunday, I spent 6 hours troubleshooting the motherboard I had, only to discover that I think I just had a broken Ethernet port. And we can't record over Wi-Fi. I mean, we could, but it would just be me moving like this all the time. It's not. So that's why we had to cancel the episode last week, is because I can't record without Ethernet to make sure I'm like stable, right? So TLDR, I got a new motherboard. It works great. After Tyler helped me on Discord and we got the BIOS updated because it was completely freaking out again. I thought I got another motherboard that was bad. I was like, are you kidding me?
Different problems. It was like, oh my gosh. This is why people don't build their own computers, because this is a huge pain.
But the BIOS update fixed it. I'm also now a master of most motherboard BIOSes, Asus and MSI. I'm a pro in both. I'm not going to tell you which one was broken, but I'll tell you in the Discord. And I'll also tell you their terrible RMA policy, which I also will talk about because that's upsetting to me still. But I got the new computer built, and so now it's built. I tested it with the most graphically demanding game ever, Hollow Knight Silk Song.
A game that can be played on like Android phones right now.
Yeah, I know. I'm joking. When I put this clip up on TikTok, I'm joking. Okay, that's what I'm gonna do before someone comments in it.
Good. Hope they comment. That's engagement.
That is true. We love angry comments here. But I've been playing a lot of Silk Song. I've gotten pretty far. I've had a couple moments where I kind of forget how the game works, and I like bash my head against a boss or an encounter, forgetting that there's always something else to do and I should just leave. And I had a big moment a couple nights ago where I straight up just left the encounter I was on, and I'm having way more fun again. I like found some really powerful stuff randomly without looking at guides or anything, which is really cool. And then I've beaten some bosses. I beat a really crazy platforming area that gave me a cool power. Like, it's been super fun. Also, it took Team Cherry 7 years to make this game. It's so big. Like, it's crazy how I'm almost 30 hours in at this point, and I feel like I'm not halfway through. That's how I feel. I'm in the middle of Act 2.
Dang. I feel like I looked it up on how long to beat, and I saw it was like 70 hours or something crazy like that.
It's nuts. So, like, and I don't want to, like, spoil or anything, but, like, I mean, if you really care, I don't know. This isn't a spoiler.
26 and a half is how long
it's what it says.
Completionist is 56 and a half.
So here's the thing, and I don't know what that number is based on, because there's one ending that cuts a dramatic part out of the game, like a long time period part. So there's 3 acts in the game. This is the part that I don't think is spoilers. There's 3 acts in the game. There's an ending after Act 2. And you
Oh,
could not get Act 3 if you
interesting.
don't do something. I'm not that far yet. I just know that. So then I feel like that's not a spoiler. That's just for life.
I feel like that's like a good heads up to people who think
Yeah.
because if you get to the end of Act 2 and you see roll credits and you go, I beat that game, you did not.
Yes, and Hollow Knight has the same kind of thing where the first Hollow Knight was like you can beat the final boss and there's like a bad ending.
Mm.
And you're done, and that's what I got. But
How
you're
long
not
is the
actually
first
done.
Hollow Knight? Should I play the first Hollow Knight before I play Silksong?
You don't have to. I mean, it's like one of those things where they're just cute bugs. It's
Yeah.
just cute bug stuff. I think it's cool because as a kid growing up, I played platformers and I loved Mario, and Hollow Knight Silksong just feel like the people that made it were like, hey, Mike, we're going to challenge you to play a platformer that's really hard and let's get into it. And I really enjoyed it. It feels so good when you beat some bosses. Like, I mean, this isn't a spoiler, but the Savage Beast Fly. Oof. If you play the game, you know what I'm talking about. Savage Beast Fly is no fun. And it's crazy because it's just an enemy they made bigger and it's so hard. I don't know why. Well, it was hard to me at least. But yeah, so it's a really good game though. I'm obsessed. Like I can't stop playing. It's pretty much all I play. Like I played a little bit of Helldivers, and I also got Borderlands 4 because that's the kind of one of the reasons I built the computer is my buddy and I wanted to play Borderlands 4 together, and Unreal Engine keeps crashing, so I have to like reinstall it now. But yeah, Hollow Knight is what I've been mostly playing. Borderlands 4, maybe like 2 or 3 hours. Fun game though, enjoying Borderlands 4, but that's kind of it. What have you been playing, Tyler?
I've been playing some Donkey Kong Bonanza, not as much as I would like to. But I'm probably 60%. I think I'm a little over halfway through the game. It's very fun. I don't think I'm gonna go for like a completionist run because it's a collectathon and it just goes on forever and ever. There's just
I
so
had
much
friends
stuff to
do
get.
that, and they said it's a long haul
It's
to get all the pieces or whatever, or all the bananas. Is it
there,
bananas?
yeah, there's bananas, there's fossils, there's
Fossils. That's what they were talking about.
And the fossils, as far as I know, are not in set locations. They are like kind of randomly generated a little bit. Because there are like different outfits you can wear that will like change your like, oh, plus 10% to like your chance to find fossils. So I think it's like somewhat randomly generated. Or procedure. There's something about it because there's also like map pieces you can get that would be like tell you where a fossil is. So I don't know exactly how it works under the hood, but there's like some element of randomness to it. It is so cool the way that you can just like punch through literally everything, almost literally everything. Like if you don't know what to do, chances are you got to punch something. And that's not in a like this game is so simple kind of way, but in a like you're going to punch something in a way that you've never punched something before, and it's going to be very satisfying. Or you're going to dig a tunnel, or you're going to do something cool like that.
That should be the quote that they put on the back of the box.
You're going to punch stuff.
Like you're going to punch something like you've never punched something before.
Yeah.
Tyler Osby.
That's my critical review. You could put it in quotes, put it on the back of the box. So yeah, I've been playing that, and I've been watching a lot of The Sopranos in my spare time. Which is a great show. I haven't watched it before. I'm having a good time. We're almost done with the 4th season watching it.
Oh wow, you're flying through.
But after doing all of the Grand Theft Auto stuff that we've been doing with Jacked, that book, I fired up Liberty City Stories, and it's just straight up like a Sopranos ripoff. The storylines are.
I love it,
including a mother who like is narcissistic and does not love her son and is constantly telling him how he's not good enough and constantly like comparing him to other people. And I'm not that far in the game, but I already don't like her. Ma Cipriani, just don't like it. You play as Tony Cipriani, and it's very Sopranos coded, and I'm having a great time with it. So. That one, I feel like there's something else I was playing too that I was spending. Oh, I do occasionally log into Destiny Rising, and just like there's a lot of like story stuff that you can do. It definitely has the feeling of I think I've talked about it before, but it definitely has the feeling of like Destiny proper on PC, with a bit more like mobile game shenanigans. Like there's like an energy system that never seems to run out but exists. That kind of stuff. It's all gotcha. There's some stuff about it I don't like, but they did nail the shooting. And when you get into a game and you start shooting aliens, feels good, man. Feels just like it. And it's
awesome.
fun to play on phone, fun to play on iPad if you have a controller synced up to it. I don't really play with touchscreen that often. I have my little Android handheld that I will play it on as well. And actually, I'm looking to upgrade that handheld because I want Destiny to run better, and it runs very smoothly on the phone and on iPad. Also, they highly encourage. This is I don't think I've ever seen a game do this before, although maybe I've heard of it. Like it sounds familiar to me, but I've never personally experienced it. They highly encourage you to download an Android emulator on your PC to play the game, and they actually offer in-game rewards for doing that. Like, oh, we see you're playing on your PC in an emulator. Here's a free, Glimmer or whatever.
Wow.
Which is insane to me. If you're on a Mac, there are some things you can do. You can probably get an Android emulator for your Mac also, but I think the better way to do it if you're on an M series Mac is to use, I can't remember what the name of the program is, but there's a program basically that lets you just run iPad apps on your Mac. I've played the game that way on it. It runs really, really smoothly. It's really, really nice. You do need a controller though, because you can't touch the screen on a Mac. So, and it doesn't have keyboard and mouse controls. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm enjoying it and I'm having a good time with it. So yeah, Donkey Kong, Liberty City Stories, and a little bit of Destiny Rising. Those are the games that I've been playing.
I love that. That's awesome, man. What a fun day today. That was cool. Good history of Donkey Kong origin story. It's a lot like the movie Wolverine Origins, but with Donkey Kong, right?
Yeah, but with not enough Ryan Reynolds.
That's true. Not enough ruined Deadpool in it. If you want to support the show, you can go to codexpodcast.net. That is our website. We got all our links on there. I'm just going to plug that today. Go ahead and do that. There's a contact form. There's our Discord. Anything you could ever want for this podcast is on there. And with that, Tyler, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Yeah. Goodbye, everybody. Oh, I have to push the button myself to play the outro music.
You do.
It's me. I'm in control of this.
I started dancing and then I just went with it.